Our passage this morning is from the book of Hebrews. We're going to begin in chapter 12, verses 2 and 3. Last Wednesdays we've been going through the book of Revelation, and we started Wednesday with the letters to the seven churches. And if you recall in the book of Revelation, that the first church that is dealt with is the church at Ephesus. And the commendation that the Lord had for the church in Ephesus was that they were a people that were very diligent in their service. They taught well, they challenged lies, they impacted their community. They were everything that, you would think a church ought to be. Everything that, pastors, strive and say, I would have a successful community of faith if they did these things. But right on the heels of that, Jesus said to them, I have this against you. In spite of everything that you got going for you, I have this against you, and that is that you've forgotten your first love. And basically, Jesus' point to them is that work doesn't matter if you don't love me. The two don't balance themselves out. You could be the most active church or the most active Christian, but if you don't love God, if you're not doing it out of love for Him, then as is said to the church at Corinth, all you're doing is banging some pots together, and it's really not going to mount up to anything. And so my friend Jim asked a question that has haunted me ever since Wednesday. Jim says, I agree, this is important. He says, but how do we keep that passion going? And I gave an answer, but I'm serious, it's haunted me ever since. Not that my answer was wrong or anything like that, but such an important topic as that deserves more than just a perfunctory answer. I mean, Jesus said to the church at Corinth, nothing else you do matters like loving me. I mean, I kind of think that if I'm kind of taking a stock of my life and I look at things and I go, well, I got a good job, and I've got a nice house, and my friends think well of me, and I'm taking care of my wife, and my kids are in college, and I start listing all these things out, and kind of sit back and go, wow, life's pretty good. And then my wife walks up to me and says, you know what? I want a divorce. What's up? I mean, and I go down the list. We've got a nice house, and, we've got good friends, and, my job's going well, and the kids are doing well, and, what's missing? And she says, you don't love me anymore. And so the rest of the stuff just doesn't matter. Now, maybe I'm cynical. Maybe in this world women would say, well, I'll just go find a boyfriend, and I'll stay with the sugar daddy and, kind of have the best of both worlds. And maybe in this world you would. But I think in that example, we all kind of innately know that, love really is important. The love relationship really is important. And that's what God said to the Christians in Ephesus. He says, all that you're doing, for me really just doesn't matter if you don't love me. I talk to people all the time, and they like to say, well, God and I have an understanding. we've got this understanding. I don't want to stand for them, but we're going to kind of work it out. And I really think what they have in mind is that it's going to kind of be like the swap meet where you're dickering. And you say, God says, well, this, and you go, well, that. Well, this, well, that. Well, how about this? How about that? And then God comes down and says, okay, do you love me? Well, I like you. I'm fond of you. But do you love me? Sound familiar, huh? And Jesus do that to Peter. You love me. When he gets right down to it, that's what God's asking. Do you love me? Because nothing else matters. I mean, I can do everything in the world, and if I don't love my wife, she's not going to be fulfilled. She may be rich, dumb, and happy, but she won't be fulfilled. I can do all of this stuff for God, but if I don't love him, I think Jesus would have you to understand that it just doesn't matter. So, as I thought about this, what does it mean to love God? How do we love God? How do we keep that love vibrant and vital amidst all of the other things that are going on? And one phrase kept running through my mind. One phrase kept running through my mind. And it was this: consider Jesus. And I thought, and I go, well, I know that's in the Bible. So let's go check it out. Well, that takes us to Hebrews chapter 12. The writer of Hebrews, and we don't know who the writer of Hebrews was. It remains unspoken in the letter. Some people will tell you that it was Paul, and let me give you a clue. If anybody ever tells you it was Paul, they're guessing. Okay? That may be their conviction, but it's not. It's a good opinion. I don't share it. Because there's just things in there that don't sound like Paul. Some people think that it might have been, her. I think I need a nap. My wife says I get punchy when I haven't slept enough. So pardon me, no, I'm kidding. Some people think that it was one of the leading ladies in the church. A lady wrote a book in the Bible? Well, that might explain why they left her name out, huh? We don't know. God knows the author of the book of Hebrews. But the writer of the book of Hebrews in chapter 11, he's talking to them about living their relationship with God. And he talks about some great folks in chapter 11 and how that, they lived their relationship with God. And he gets to the beginning of chapter 12, because you realize that when whoever it was that wrote Hebrews didn't do chapter and verse, it's just one continual thought. When he gets to the beginning of chapter 12, he says, since we have this great cloud of witnesses, these folks that are, our examples in the faith, he encourages them to put aside all of that hinders you from running with endurance the race that is set before you. Okay? So he says, I just want to encourage you, thinking about Abraham and all them other folks, they're this example to help us to lay aside the things that would weigh us down and hinder us in running with endurance this race. And then immediately he says this: fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and the perfecter of our faith, who, for the joy set before him, endured the cross, despising the shame, and is set down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who has endured such hostility by sinners against himself, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. So to them, he says, they're saying, well, how do we do this relationship with God thing? And he says, well, there's these other folks and many others that aren't listed, but he says, ultimately, I want you to fix your eyes on Jesus. Now, I want you to kind of understand with me, when he says, fix your eyes on Jesus, he's telling you to stare at him, right? Right? Okay. So make sure I'm not hallucinating that there are people here. I'm really by myself, and I mean, when he says to fix your eyes on Jesus, he says to stare at Jesus. Okay? And not just like stare in that really creepy way, where you kind of start checking things. I saw on the news yesterday, and guys, I am not endorsing this, but according to a study out of England, you are healthier if you stare at women's breasts. No, brother. No, brother. No, brother. That's the creepy stare. I mean, really, a study out of England. So, ladies, if guys are telling you they're just trying to be healthy, hit them. Just hit them. And they'll come to find out that staring doesn't make you healthier. Well, I couldn't believe that. I thought, oh my God. Okay. Now, we're not talking the creepy stare. We're talking that stare like, gentlemen, ladies, you watch a golfer, right? And you're like really intently looking. How do they hold their club? How do they shift their weight? How do they this? How do they that? I mean, you're staring at them because you're considering every little move, every little tick. I've got a friend of mine I was talking to yesterday, and he's thinking of doing a doctoral program, but he wants to do it in preaching. And I said, brother, you can't teach somebody how to preach. I said, that comes from your relationship with the Lord, but that doesn't stop preachers from trying. I mean, how does Billy Graham hold his Bible? Is it five fingers or only 4? How does he wave his right hand? How does he stand in the pulpit? How does he say, Jesus? And they stare at him, and they, you got the rewind button and the pause, and, and so you kind of, it's like, brother, you're not Billy, all right? That's a sort of thing Paul's talking about. I'm even catch myself. The author of Hebrews is talking about. He's saying, you want to know how to live a relationship with God? Look at Jesus. Consider Jesus. Not just in passing, but I want you to consider Jesus. I want you to stare at him, because I want you to understand this. Jesus is the central and the essential figure in a relationship with God. Okay? Listen to me. I am a Christian minister. I am a Christian disciple. And now in saying that, I have just identified myself, right? You bet I don't read the Quran. I am a Christian. That means that I follow Christ. Don't ask me to pray in the name of Hare Krishna. Okay? I follow Christ. And if I follow Christ, then it only stands to reason that I'm going to look at Jesus as the central and essential figure in what it means to be a disciple of God. I'm not going to look at Ken, because I know where he's looking. Okay? I'm not going to look at other people, because they're not the ones that I'm told to follow. I'm not a, and I mean nothing against this if you are. I don't identify myself as a Lutheran, because I don't follow Luther. I'm not a Baptist, because I don't follow John the Baptist. I'm a Christian, so I'm supposed to follow Christ. So he needs to be, I need to understand him as the central figure in my life with God. Matter of fact, the writer of Hebrews says, look at Jesus, consider him, because he is the author and the perfecter of our faith. Now let's break that down just a little bit, because I think it's a little confusing. When I hear the word author, I think of somebody who writes a book, right? Make sense? Somebody tells you, I'm an author. You don't expect them to be climbing under a sink working on plumbing. You thought, well, what book have you written? But that's not exactly what the writer of Hebrews is talking about. Remember in the sentence immediately before that, he tells them, I want you to run with endurance this race. Remember that? If you don't, you have short-term memory loss, and you can just look at the sentence right before it. Okay, it's all right. You hide your own Easter eggs this year. That's okay. It's a blessing. Trust me. He uses an athletic analogy. He's talking about running a race. So in this very next sentence, when he talks about the author, he uses another athletic picture. I don't know why the translators of the King James and the translators of the New American Standard chose the word author. The idea is there, but it really doesn't conceptualize the idea of the forerunner, the pathfinder, the originator, the Lewis and Clark. Because that's the idea of this word here. That Jesus has gone where no one has ever gone before. Jesus had a relationship with God that no one had ever had before. As good as Abraham was, as good as Isaac and Jacob and Josiah and Noah and all of those other folks, as good as there were in the relationship that Jesus had with God, nobody comes close. He is way out in front. Kind of like when I was in high school and we would go out and have to run track. Okay, they'd go, you got 3 hours or 3 minutes to run a mile. And I'd go, 3 hours? Maybe. If you give me like a break part of the way through. If you come back tomorrow, I might get done. I mean, we're talking like that. He is just way out there. And not only is he way far ahead, not only has he blazed the trail, but it's not a trail that was ever there. So he has made the trail. That's why they use that idea of an author. Somebody who is an author is somebody who creates something that wasn't there before, right? I'm reading a book right now, and before this author wrote this book didn't exist. You know, if you write a book that somebody else has written, you know what they call you? A plagiarist. Jesus wrote a book. He created a path that had never been there before. That's why when we come to the Lord's Supper and he says, a new covenant I give unto you. Now, that's not to say that the old covenant was voided. Because remember what Jesus said. He goes, I didn't come to destroy the law. Didn't come to do away with it. I came to fulfill it. So now that the old one is fulfilled, he has given a new one. It's kind of like a relay race. I liked the relay race. The 4x100, I didn't have to run 400 yards. I only had to run 100 yards. All right? And then I gave it to somebody else. Well, he came along, he fulfilled the Old Testament and took off from there and gave a new covenant to us. And these Jews that were well steeped in the Old Covenant go, where are you going, Jesus? Where are you taking us? And he says, just follow me. Writing to Hebrews, that's what the author's saying. Your obligation to the old covenant is fulfilled. You're walking in a new covenant. Just follow Jesus. Well, where's he going? I don't know. Just follow him. Do you have to know where you're going to follow somebody? No. You may keep saying, where are we going? You may keep asking, are we there yet? But you don't have to know where you're going. All you have to do is keep your eyes on the one who does know the way. And so he says to them, keep your eyes on Jesus, because he's the author. He's the originator. He's the pathfinder. He's the pioneer. He's the one that made the way. All you got to do is follow him. But he says he's also the perfecter. He's not just the author of our faith. He's the perfecter of our faith. Now, the term perfecter is very interesting. It carries this idea of one who doesn't just do it well, but does it perfectly, completely. I mean, you see the Golden Bear up there with his golf club. I mean, I'm sorry, Jack Nicholson, Chicho Rodriguez, those are the guys I liked. And they get up there and they just, man, they address that ball and they put long distance postage on it. And it's gone. And then you know what they would do after they won, say the PGA? You know what they would do? They would go back and critique their swings. See, Jack, Jack, how you doing? Jack, are you out of your mind? You just won the Masters. And you're critiquing your swing? What would he say? Because there's always room for improvement. Well, you know what? Jesus will never tell you that. There's no room for improvement with Christ. He did it perfectly. Philippians chapter 2, I love that. That and earlier in the book of Hebrews, the same theme is hit on where in talking about Christ, well, matter of fact, it was in Hebrews that the writer said this: consider Jesus, who was in all points tempted like you are, but without sin. He did it perfectly. I mean, Paul would ask people, if you can't see Jesus, follow me. Not me, but Paul. And I could say to you, if you're struggling to understand how to walk a relationship with God, follow me to a degree. Because I realize that I dropped the ball. Paul realized he dropped the ball. But Jesus never dropped the ball. Every single time, every single event, Jesus got it right. Man. Yes, indeed. He says to them, you want to know how to walk in a relationship with God? You will find no one better than Jesus Christ. Because he went there